Hi, this is Eternal King here, bringing you another LOR video today. So, I do think we're going to be covering both Vermintide 2 and LOR at the same time. Because essentially you have one game that I'm a competitive authority in that I can talk about pretty extensively in terms of the Eternal format. I can give you guys ideas for essentially every single deck construction that exists. Right, every single deck construction that exists in the game that is competitive, I've probably seen before. I probably have some idea how to build it, and then I can even talk about like off-meta constructions for those decks and compare and contrast them, which is very rare that someone can do that. Like I can tell you, what does Field of Rush ramp look like versus, an Eddy ramp shell, right? Like I can tell you kind of how these things compare and contrast. Where their strengths are and the way that you want to build them that's different. All-in ASOL ramp, right, with Field of Rush, where you turbo flip ASOL off of just one card, right? You play the ASOL with Field of Rush, you get two 10-10s, and then you just cross your fingers and hope he flips, right? Like old school stuff like that. I've seen it all, essentially, over the course of this game. You want to play archetypal mid-range. I can show you like what your normal construction is for Sejuani Gangplank, right? It's a deck that's existed pretty much forever over the course of LOR, along with Pirate Aggro with Misfortune. Chances are I've seen it, just because I'm not seeing it currently and just because I'm not seeing it be popular and played, doesn't mean that it's unplayable. Standard Warning Shot, Jagged Butcher, full parlays, full Shell Shockers for the attune, so you can, Shell Shocker parlay for that turn 1 advantage. Obviously, Black Market Merchant, being a similar deal, Make It Rain, Mirai Warden, Tusk Speaker, Babbling Berg, Zap Sprayfin, Eye of Nakagoboros, Gangplank, Spirits Unleashed, and then Sejuani. This would be, for example, a competitive and normal construction for Gangplank Sejuani. But if you actually look at the most recent stats, a lot of these sort of typical deck constructions are being run in a weird way. I believe the current stats for like Gangplank Sejuani is like on 2 strong arms or something weird like that, where they're playing into an Eddy deck. So, for example, Eddy will snap down a matron with a Heisho, an ephemeral Heisho, and then maybe you strong arm the ephemeral Heisho to interrupt their combo, and then the game is still winnable for you. Like, I understand why it's in the deck. But yeah, there is value to meme cards if the meme card is answering a very specific, or is providing a very specific solution to a problem. It's not bad, right? Just because it's a meme doesn't mean it's bad. We talked about previously about like running Rainbow Fish in Standard and like random elusive win cons when you don't have a dedicated elusive deck. Those things are just good. They're literally putting out the stats right now. Random Mecha Yordles in your aggro deck. All that stuff is just winning more. Because you essentially still have the same core of the deck. It still does all the things that the deck does well. But you just get like random win cons out of running, including strange cards. Previously, we of course talked about Annie Jhin, and the best ranked Annie Jhin right now is slow Annie Jhin with the landmark Conservatory, right? It's on Conservatory right now, so like that's weird. Running Annie Jhin with Red and Blue Conservatory is a weird way to pilot the deck. Alternatively, I saw one of the top players in the format, because if I'm top 100, he's top 10. He was running full in book, right? So instead of Raven Bloom Conservatory, he's taking it from the book perspective, right? So like he's full in book with skill duplication. That's like a top 10 player in the format. I'm a top 100 player in the format, and I probably could be more competitive, but I do alternate between like real decks and memes, and like once I get far enough, I'm kind of just happy with what I've done. But yeah, if you really want to push and really want to sweat it out, figuring out the kind of weird ways to run established and powerful decks is actually like a pretty good Eternal solution. Like, that Annie Jhin's a good deck, but you also know that the person's got the mandatory Annie Jhin list with all of the creature spam and stuns, and then the burn finish. People have just got that memorized. in the competitive scene. So they've got that memorized. You have to run the deck a little weird, and if you run the deck a little weird, you tend to do better. So that's good to know, right? And we see that with a lot of things. Again, so I talked about Lucky Cad's Lucky Fish, Rainbow Fish with Lucky Cad, and then I also talked about taking his Heart of the Tree and making it competitive for Eternal, because it's kind of just a weird way to run ramp, and it was actually like decently successful, I felt, even in the Eternal format, which it was not designed for, where you have like more competition. I still thought that his off meta way of running ramp was like worth considering, because it's just weird, right? You just run the established archetype, but you run it a little weird, and it's gonna do well for you. I guess you could say that the way that I run my 8 win 100% win rate Azir Aurelia with Emperor's Army, the way that I run it's a little weird, because I don't use things like there are established cards that are typically show up, right? So like Shadow Apprentice, like I'm just full off. I don't think Shadow Apprentice is right. I've always been Treasure Seeker Azir Aurelia. So Treasure Seeker Azir Aurelia plus Forsaken Bakai, you just get lots of 2/1s in there with the Sparring Student, and then 1 Dune Keeper, because just that one is really nice sometimes. But like, that's a little weird. And at the time, people said stories were really bad. So just the idea that you would run Emperor's Army in your tempo deck, it's kind of like running Ravenbloom in your Annie Jhin deck. It's a little weird. At the time it was. Now it's mandatory across all iterations of Azir Aurelia. But at the time it was a little weird. And then the way that I run my Rise is a little weird, right? I'm not on the one of Jury Rig and the one of Shurima Tellstones, and just like full in on Eye of the Dragon, Claws of the Dragon, or full in Trinket Trade, or things that you would see previously. I'm not putting as much stock in that. I'm putting way more stock in weird cards like Ritual of Renewal, which again, apparently it's not that weird, because people have pulled out like 60% win rates who are not me with this deck. And then obviously if it is me, I know exactly how to pilot this deck, and I'm going to pull out even better win rates than that. But yeah, it's a little weird. It's a little bit of a strange way to run Rise, where like essentially you're just devaluing open attacks. Unless you're presenting like a crap ton of damage, like an Emp Army Azir Aurelia deck, and unless you're rallying constantly and presenting extra damage on turns you're not supposed to be attacking on, like unless you're doing that specifically, you'll just heal through all the damage that the opponent's presenting, while obviously bouncing anything that's more threatening than that. You'll just heal through it. Just heal through it. Just stall it out. Don't even care, But you play the Eye of the Dragon, but usually you just play the Eye of the Dragon to eat removal from your opponent. You play the 1-drop just for the chump blocker. You play this just for the chump blocker, right? But the real power of this deck is just pure healing stall, which is not something you see in Eternal ever. Like, I think this is the only dedicated healing deck in Eternal. There is no Targon healing currently. But yeah, this has like as much healing as something like like a Tom Kench style deck. Heal, like a lot of healing, right? And then everything else is just like stall. So yeah, weird Rise. My Azir Aurelia construction was weird before it was considered the best deck in the game. Obviously my Temple is weird. I would even say that this Temple is weird. Like the most competitive version of Temple with just like group shot, pie toss, and like no real like super high-end spells. I would say that this is a little weird as well. Like obviously it's Turbo Seraphine, but I'm a little surprised that there isn't like a little more some higher end spells to answer specific things. Like we talked about Thresh Nasus, right? Like Thresh Nasus is like a really, really good deck, and there's just like no denies, no mini morphs, nothing that would answer something bigger. So I guess you would just eat the atrocity to face and lose in that particular case. And then my version of Temple is also weird. So it's like, which version of Temple is weirder? The one that's nothing but like ping 1 mana spam, or my version of Temple that's all like super heavy? Like I just want to like get 4 mana Hex Obliterators and like 4 mana Rocket Barrages and just let her rip, right? Because I'm just making the call that like denies don't exist, because they usually don't right now in the meta. So like that's a weird way to play a Temple. Red card into Rocket Barrage, like that's not usually what you see in a Temple player. But that's the line I would prefer. Typically like 2-drop, and then, you know, ping something threatening, Vic Rash, right, to cycle, or Soaring Cartographer, either one, and then TF Red card, and then Rocket Barrage, and then usually you're caught up on tempo at that point. And then if the opponent doesn't present any sort of aggressive tempo, you just slam the temple and you're golden. But yeah, that's a little weird. So yeah, you are seeing in Eternal that these sort of out of left field players are actually doing better than standard constructions for certain archetypes. Absolutely. Just based on a pure statistical situation, right? That the either like a slow anti-Jhin or a skill duplication anti-Jhin might in fact perform better than straight creature-based anti-Jhin, or even just perform on parity. That's very, very unusual. Very, very unusual. And so when I talked about like more competitive or upgraded Ziggs Poppy, I was literally just kind of talking about the exact same thing. Is you take the archetype and you just run it a little weird. Right, so Vex instead of Poppy. So like you're presenting a 5/4 with Fearsome that pings something instead of presenting a 4 mana 3/3 essentially, and like, just like that alone, when you're also presenting the Ziggs 3/4 that pings something on 3, like that alone is kind of a struggle boat situation for the player, requiring very specific answers. So like that's the whole thing, is just running a little weird. Don't care about, like, let all your creatures trade on parity, and then just play your tempo champions. So like, oh, you traded with my 1-drop, okay. Maybe I pinged Nexus for 1 with the Legion Saboteur, that's good enough. Then I played 2 more 1-drops. And then, I push some face damage, and then there's also trades happening, and then I play the Ziggs, and then I play the Vex, right? And so it just turns out that that's, in certain situations, more powerful. In certain situations, it's not, because if you are able to basically present a wide board with things like House Spider, which I have cut from this deck because we no longer care about going wide. Obviously, if you play House Spider with the Poppy, you can do some work. But yeah, I just straight up cut House Spider, just like not caring about House Spider at all. Let the creatures trade on parity, push some face damage, slam Vig, slam Vex, burn Wincon. It's a little weird, but it just, sometimes a little weird is better. And yeah, you see that kind of across the board with the Eternal meta. Obviously, this deck just does not exist in the Eternal meta currently. So this is Legacy Swim Elusives. Legacy Swim Elusives is an exceptionally weird deck to be playing right now. Because, and it's an exceptionally weird deck to have 100% win rate with, because it is essentially a deck that does one thing. You're making the call that everyone's running Eddy decks, and they have basically ways to chump up the board, ways to heal their Nexus, and then ways to play big things. So none of those things necessarily interact very well with your, elusives, unless they're on like 3 harsh ones or something. But yeah, so you're making the call that you're just going to go under everyone's board spam and then present a burst lethal opportunity. And you're just hard making that call, and then you're just winning 100% of games doing exactly that every single game. It's just like Acorn, Darken Lodestone, or, Acorn, Erasmus, Darken Lodestone, and then Big Burst Discount, and then winning off of that. Essentially just presenting 2 or 3 elusive bodies and just winning off of that. And so that's a very weird thing to be doing right now, but it's very, very effective. I think that's going to be it for this video. Again, I think I have a fairly comprehensive grasp of Eternal as a format. I don't think there's much outside the realm of what we've covered in our videos. We've even talked about underplayed archetypes and snap building underplayed archetypes. So yeah, we talked about scouts. And how you can snap build scouts to actually win games. We talked about jacks, how you can snap build jacks and win games. We talked about burn aggro, constructions, both on meta and off meta. I think we sometimes talk about Undir. My Undir deck also being kind of an archetypal mid-range weird deck to play. We talked about 60% Darius win rate, which was above average for that archetype. Yeah, Darius Katrina not being the most standard of deck constructions for sure. We've kind of covered it all. We covered upgraded Sun Disk. Yeah, and so I will also be uploading a Warhammer Vermintide 2 video because, again, a little bit more going on, given that that game is new to the channel, and, I literally have like none of the characters unlocked and none of the weapons unlocked yet, so a little more exciting from a gameplay perspective, but don't worry, we are going to continue covering LOR, and obviously if there are any significant shifts in the meta, I will be talking about that. If I can find someone present me a high win rate Yasuo deck, like I will be the first person that comes out and says, holy crap, we got a 60% Yasuo win rate here. This is how you should run Yasuo, and it's amazing. Like, I'll be the first person that says that. When it happens. It hasn't happened yet. Right? The first, when they come out with a Shrooms deck that is like a 60% win rate in Eternal, I'll be like, holy crap, Caitlyn Shrooms, winning 60% of games in Eternal. Like, I'll be the first person who comes out and tells you that. It hasn't happened yet. Right now, I would argue that a lot of these archetypes would be on the memeier side of the spectrum, if they're not like good, per se. Same thing with obviously like something an all-in like transform deck. Just like currently, not what I would consider to be good when compared to everything else that you could possibly play. Birds, right? Like you want to play like birds. Birds is like a fun meme deck to play in Eternal. So you just run all the birds, and you only have like Talon Strike for interaction, and then obviously you're kind of depending on the Vanguard, Wincon, or the buffs from Snowdog and Omen Hawk, just like normal creature spam, Nico stuff, and then slamming a Garen or a Ferocious Fluffs to potentially win. It's fun. It's a fun meme. So, if that Birds deck comes out that is, that good, I'll be the first to let you know. And then, obviously, when I saw that Lee Sin was, performing better than I thought he would, I was kind of all over that. I don't know if he still is. I think he might have dropped off a bit. People might have dropped off the Lee Sin constructions, but there was a second that he was having his time in the sun again, before he got slapped back down. This is Eternal King, signing out.